Welcome once more to the Race into Time exhibition at Cork Street, and thank you for turning out in such numbers, which we didn't. Anyway, look, Stephen Vince, the principal sculptor at this place. I have had very little to do with the visual arts over the years, so I don't know much about. I haven't known many artists, and I'm very interested in what makes them tick. But you didn't actually start life as an artist, did you? You started life
ticking.
You started life ticking. Yeah.
That's correct. Now, I started as an agricultural scientist at Reading University and wrote a computer program to solve all the farming problems, and became the envy of too many people, so I left. I was kicked out, really, I suppose I ought to be honest, so that they could take over my work.
Right. And how did you become such an accomplished sculptor?
I suppose I was angry at that, and I feel that art has a stronger voice than science when it actually comes down to it. A stronger, focused voice. One needs science for the breadth of information, but art for the focal point.
Can we come back to that? I just want to talk first of all about the exhibition, because if you look around at the paintings, it's based on the Olympics. It's art, on the Olympic year and all that kind of stuff. And if you look at the paintings and if you look at the sculptures, plenty of directly sort of athletic type things, boxers, and you've got elephants jumping over high hurdles and all that kind of stuff.
That's exactly what they do, yes.
I know, of course, I've seen them do it all the time. Yeah. But on the other hand, there's plenty that's drifted a long way from...
Well, that's Peter. That's
Peter.
Yeah.
But it evolved, didn't it? This whole idea evolved. I want to know how it all evolved.
Yeah, we started off with the Olympic posters, thinking that the artists who had created the Olympic posters had not created posters about the Olympics, but about their own art. And we wanted to make a comment on that. And then our lawyers told us, be careful, because if you do that, the Olympic Committee, who now have the copyright of those posters, will be on your back, and then they will be on your back too, because you might have a circle of being an athlete in your work. So Peter said, well, as far as I'm concerned, Olympics, or the whole thing is joyful. So he started off with these joyful images, and I started off with elephants during the Olympics, because I thought, well, perhaps there won't be any elephants actually in the Olympics, and they won't be able to sue me for doing those.
There's very few. Yeah. Great. And just as another preliminary point, you invited us, the Campaign for Real Farming, to get involved and come and, as you said, use the space that you've got here in the gallery. Now, I'm quite interested, or very interested, asking why us? I mean, why not anybody else? What's the connection between you and us, in your view?
Why the Campaign for Real Farming is to say the Campaign for Real Food?
Or Queen's Park Rangers or the Vatican or anybody else. Yeah.
I think for the same reason as Ruth chose to do real farming as a... It reminds me of the first lecture I had at Reading University from Professor Tuck, who spent 2.5 hours to explain the parable of the Gadarene swine, which involved lots of pigs running down a slope. And he said, in economics, we're all running down that slope, and we're not thinking about where we're going. We're thinking about how to compete with each other. And some pigs will be stronger and push through, and others will be slick and run fast, and others will be crafty and they'll trip others up. And they're all the things which humans do in order to get there first, but not one will be thinking of where they're going. When they all go over the edge of the cliff, that's where economics is going, and other things too, if we don't stop and think about it. And then he went on about calculus and differentiation and back to first principles. And when you look at Campaign for Real Farming, you were going back to the first principles of farming in that, of how to farm. We keep going asking the question behind it till you get to the core of the problem. And that's why you're so important in my understanding of how to solve these problems.
Great. Well, I mean, I know what I think the fundamental principle is of farming. What do you think it is? You were an agriculturalist after all.
I'm just saying, but the further back one goes, the closer you get to the how farming. Well, you've written books on it. I can't repeat what you've written. I've read some of the books and they're very good. And just recommend those.
I'll just say very quickly, I think farming is about feeding people without wrecking the rest of the world. I mean, that's what it should be about. Which brings us to the Olympics, because if you look at the Olympics, it is obviously about, one would say, rather good things. I mean, it's celebrating human form and human abilities and all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, particularly if you look at, let us say, 2012, it has a kind of corruption about it, which is corporate power and so on and so on and so on, as if the nobility of human beings and the fine qualities have been expropriated by these companies for commercial purposes with the connivance of the government. I mean, that's how I feel about it. Is this how you feel about it? Or?
Well, you have to look where the connivance. I agree with you, but again, we had an exhibition in Hong Kong, and John Major, when he was Prime Minister, came out, and I'd been working in one of the Vietnamese boat camps, and he came to inspect that boat camp, and since I knew the guard, he said, well, if you want to meet your Prime Minister and have a chat, then here's the chance. So as we walked round, John Major was talking to me, and I said, why didn't you do this, and why didn't you do that? He said, I can't. He said, I'm not in charge. These people, he had all these heavies around him. They're in charge. I just do as I'm told. He said, I can't say what you're telling me to say. He made a speech, and the only place they had was the dustbin area. So they turned some dustbins over, and he stood on these and made a speech. But it was what he was told to say.
This is the Prime Minister of Britain.
Of Great Britain. Yes.
Yeah. And the heavies were who? Not the civil servants?
I think they all wore suits. They looked the same to me when they got a suit on.
Yeah. But do you feel this sense of, as it were, the world being overtaken by these power groups, these elites? Is this what you're protesting against? Because there's a great sense of protest.
You think we're protesting?
Aren't you? I mean, I thought you were.
No, we're responding, reacting to a situation. I was hoping you were going to do the protesting. And
well, I've done some protesting.
and the others.
Well, let's talk about the power of art, because I try to change the world, because I'm very pretentious like that, by sort of writing arguments basically. But art is something different. Art doesn't deal with argument. Art deals with something else, emotion. Why is art, in your opinion, so powerful and so necessary?
It's not my opinion, but I have to use examples because I can't explain it any other way. But if one considers, for example, religious art, which was not everybody's cup of tea, but if you'd been living 500 or 1,000 years ago and there's a huge painting in the cathedral, and you can look at the painting and understand what the story is, listening to the guide and the pulpit talking Latin is not going to make much sense, but as a simple person, illiterate, you look at the painting and you understand what he's talking about. So the power of art was very powerful, and the governments like was Henry VIII or the Cromwell chap, they destroyed all that art because they realised how powerful it was. And the Muslim world will not allow representation, as Peter does here, so it has to be abstract, because if you put representation into it, it's too powerful. So there must be something very powerful about art that makes governments and others afraid of it. And that's why I think it's important that we have the connection between art and science.
Can you just expand on the idea that art sort of, as it were, gets to the core of things in a way that science doesn't? Can you explain what the real difference between the two approaches is?
Well, it's a lot of assumptions there, too, scientifically, doesn't it? It assumes that the science has got it right in the first place. Art can't make that assumption. But what art can do is trigger a response in somebody to start thinking, hopefully. That's one thing it can do. And if they start to think, then they start to listen, and then the scientist or the preacher, as it would be in a cathedral, starts to talk, and then they start to understand.
Just one last thing, because I want to throw it open to the chaps. Your sculptures, well, I don't know whether they're going to be seeing them, are we, on screen? But they are very fine, they're very beautiful and often very funny and all the rest of it. But one thing about them is that they're very anthropomorphic. And when I did zoology at a university, an old one, we were told you must not be anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphism, is ascribing human characteristics to animals is a very bad thing. You don't understand them that way. And that was in the 1960s, and also at school in the 1950s. More and more since then, starting with people like Jane Goodall and Konrad Lorenz and so on, people have moved more and more towards saying, actually, you can't really understand animals unless you empathize with them, and you can't empathize with them unless you start with the assumption that they are actually rather like us. They do think, they are conscious, they have emotions. And all this, I think, is in your representations of them, something you feel about them. Do you want to talk about that?
It's long word answer, whatever it was, but it's true that we can't assume that they think the way we do. But they often, as Jane Goodall shows, they often seem to. Last week, 3 years ago, I found some cheap tulip bulbs, and I didn't know where to plant them, so I planted them under a tree amongst the grass, where that cutworms or something might come up and nip them off. But I don't know where else. Anyway, the first year I had beautiful blooms of red and yellow tulips. The second year we had beautiful blooms of red and yellow for about 5 days. And then one day I went out and they'd all gone, they were all lying on the ground. Beautiful blooms just lying on the ground. And that was it, no more things. So this year they started to come up and they started to immediately disappear. And Ruffy did an experiment with a glass jar, and then I was looking out at the barn and I saw this pheasant early in the morning wanging over to these tulips, and like Don Quixote with the windmills, he charged at them and the tulips went flying, his feathers up in the air, and turned around. In the end, he tail flying, he looked around, all gone, and he strutted off in a really bad mood at having been confronted by these tulips. And it tells me that animals have an awful lot that we've got, and it doesn't matter whether they think the same as us. It's nice. The reason why the elephants are doing these things is because we were worried about the extinction of elephants amongst every other living species, and as the king, to me, the most important big animal, the sort of the leader, as it were, or head of the thing. And they also live the same length of time as us, and everybody seems to love elephants, and yet the elephant can't be protected simply because we want to protect it. It's probably that the elephant has to adapt to be able to protect itself. A lot of species have to adapt to protect themselves, and so I just do elephants because we can relate to them. I think human beings do relate to elephants more than, say, rats or hedgehogs or something.
Partly because they're big, but partly because they are very, very bright and clearly very emotional animals. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Is there anything more you would like, as it were, to add before we throw this open to the
Well, since
floor?
we're speaking to a group here and to the whole world, I think, because this is going out on the internet and it's a worldwide internet, this forum that we've designed is in itself one of the exhibits, one of the artworks. Just as Damien Hirst produces a dead shark to talk about death, we want to talk about the opposite, living and the future. And so this forum is an artwork. So welcome to the most unusual artwork yet in the gallery, thankfully in Cork Street.
Very good. And do you think, I don't know, you probably don't want to have an opinion on this, but do you think this is what art exhibitions ought to do? Because as you say, they don't, as a rule. I mean, they could do much more. They could take art into...
Well, let's see what happens. Hopefully people look at what's happened and there's galleries watching what we're doing. We put a red pear in the window as red rag to a bull and see if they take the opportunity. If not, I hope they do. I hope it changes the nature of art quite a lot, and an appreciation of both ways of art and science.
Brilliant. Thank you. Shall we then throw it open? Who else would like to ask or say something to Stephen? Not to me.
I'm quite interested in the idea of Olympic art, the place of art in the Olympics, and how and whether that's changed. And my suspicion is that it is. And I know a little bit about it. It tends to be more kind of design based, but it was one of the Olympics in Germany, I think in the 70s. There's a very famous graphic designer whose name eludes me, Otto van something, I think.
Sounds German, yeah.
It's along those lines.
Sounds Dutch to me.
No, but I've got the big sort of lovely Phaidon hardcover book of all his work, and the work he produced. He was the creative director for the entire Olympics, and so everything was sort of tied together, including he oversaw the architecture, the signage, and then obviously all the posters, and it was this amazing series of kind of screen printed posters of athletes, which very much sort of set almost a new. It was almost a new style and a whole new thing, and a lot of the typesetting, and particularly the signage. And using kind of small icons it's obviously very complicated doing signage on the Olympic site. And there were all these amazing innovations, which to me are sort of genuinely artistic. And the guy was, he was probably quite risky in today's terms, because you gave this one guy who was essentially an artist and had that sort of creative edge to it. And he was given total control of everything. I mean, it did come out of. I think from that Olympics there are numerous examples of things that genuinely kind of shook things up and new ideas and newly creative. And you come to London 2012 and it's absolutely famous already for its kind of horrific logo, which you can just tell that there wasn't one person who was given the space to be creative. That's kind of designed by committee, lowest common denominator, worst garish horror, and it's the same with the mascots. They just kind of add insult to injury and that kind of thing. And what's that shift, and what could art's place in the Olympics be? And what are you trying to say with what you're doing?
Well, there's a difference between the artists who are given the right to produce Olympic art because they're allowed to use things that refer directly to the Olympics. For us outsiders, we've got the opposite. We're not allowed to produce anything that has anything directly to do with an Olympic image. And we're not. We're just making a comment on the Olympics. There's our take on the Olympics as a concept, and whilst a lot of people, we all appreciate how important it is to have it, but there's all these side issues, and when these side issues of the food we eat, etc., came along, we felt they were actually more important than the games themselves. And they are part of the games. The spectators are much, to us, to Peter, it seems that the spectators are far more important and interesting than the athletes. But you're talking about something else, and those designs, I feel it was sad that it was spread out and not much, it doesn't all fit around the same conceptual design. When there's lots of different committees, they just argue and they come up with all sorts of funny things. And how they get there, I don't know. That's a shame.
You made a comment earlier about that the official Olympic art was much more to do with the artist's work than the Olympic ideal. What were you talking about? Was it Anish Kapoor's big, huge spirally thing, or the posters?
That's very unlike any of his work, but he's had to,
it's funny,
he's not the right person to perhaps design that, but he got the job and he's fine.
And just to say, we didn't actually, in our little conversation, touch on the sort of hard political points about this is supposed to be the people's games, but on the other hand, the people of East London were seriously disrupted by this. And, £7 billion has been spent on the Olympics, and the idea is there's a spin-off that somehow the East End will benefit from this. If we'd spent the £7 billion directly on the East End, we'd have achieved far more, etc., etc., etc. It's the expropriation.
Yes. So we're talking about getting people to come to England as a tourist attraction, or making sure that people live here. The good that will come out of it, in my view, is what you people in this forum, the people who listen to the forum, can do to improve their way of living, their way of eating, etc. If that is a benefit that comes out of these Olympics that will achieve something everlasting. If it's just an Olympics Games that comes and goes as it has done in Germany and every other country that's been to, and it's forgotten, it goes to China, it comes out, it's the end of it. If we can have a lasting legacy and everybody really does improve their way of eating and their health, then you've all achieved a wonderful thing, in my view.
But we won't have the Olympics itself is not going to improve the way we eat because it's all been, whatever the word is, handed out to big corporates to do their thing.
Yes, but you're pointing out that that's wrong. And
Okay.
and the people look at that and say, we're being forced to do this, it is wrong. It's in the limelight. Because the Olympics is so much in the limelight, everything you do is in the limelight. And therefore it has more effect this year than it could any other year for 100 years. Yeah, it's the opportunity to really say something, in my view.
Any other comments anyone would like to make? And if there aren't, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there aren't, come on.